Konnichiwa minasama, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When you go to a vending machine here in America, you're likely to find something like this: a granola bar or a candy bar, soft drinks, water, or snacks of that sort. But when you go to a vending machine in Japan, oftentimes what you find instead are alcoholic beverages, cigarettes, cold as well as hot drinks such as coffee and tea, and also they have food that's prepared and ready to be eaten. And this is just one example of the many differences between America and Japan. We are a group of corporate consultants from Methods Frameworks, and we're here today to talk to you about the differences between doing business in Japan and America. My name is Gabe Aktuka, and I'll be talking to you today about the cultural differences. I'm joined today by Kayleen Hand, who will be talking to you about the Japanese economy, Allison Schultz, who will be talking to you about the infrastructure as well as the location, Faith Cervantes, who will be talking to you about the market differences, and last but certainly not least, Renee Townsend, who will be talking to you about the Japanese government and the legal aspects. Since we have a limited amount of time in which to give this presentation, I'd like to ask you to hold all questions until the end of our presentation, at which point we will give our group recommendation of whether or not you should expand your business into Japan and answer any questions you may have. With that being said, I'd like to start by talking about the cultural differences. As I said, my name is Gabe Aktuka. I've been working with Method Frameworks for about 3 years now, although I have 7 years of experience working as a cultural analyst. And 3 things I'm going to be talking to you today about include the business etiquette differences, as well as the language and writing systems, and the difference in values between American and Japanese culture. So starting with the business etiquette, 99% of the Japanese population speaks Japanese solely. A lot of them don't speak English, and oftentimes they try to help in any way that's possible. They're very accepting of foreigners, but oftentimes they're more embarrassed by the fact that they don't know either language, and they try to help in any way that's possible. So they are very welcoming, they're very opening to new types of people. Also, they prefer personal relationships in business, and they also stress the importance of organizational hierarchy. So when your organization, your representatives, or your associates go to meet with these people, it is imperative that they immediately state what their position is within the organization. That way they know how they should treat them and how to respect them. Also, formality is a very big thing in Japanese business culture. It's very important that your associates and your representatives are dressed properly for the occasion, that they arrive on time. Punctuality is very important, that all things are clearly communicated and documented, and that appointments are made weeks or months in advance, not days in advance. And also, as you can see on the screen, business cards are very important and very different from the way they're used here in America, because they're given and received with 2 hands and a slight bow, because it is as if the giver is giving a piece of themselves to that person, and it shows a very strong sense of trust and respect. As I said, 99% of the population speaks Japanese, but there are several different dialects which are present in the country, and they're area specific. In the same way, there are 4 different writing systems which are also area specific, so it's important that you know which area of the country you're planning on doing business in. That way your representatives or your associates will be able to learn the corresponding dialect and writing system that are necessary to be successful in that area. But one thing that is universal throughout the entire country is the idea of harmony, as you can see from the picture above. Harmony pervades all things in Japanese culture, and as a result, the Japanese people are very non-confrontational. They stress the need to save face. They're very upfront, they're very genuine, and also they have a hard time saying no because they don't like to displease people. So be sure to pay close attention to nonverbal communication in the form of body language and facial expressions to detect any sort of discomfort or dissatisfaction. It's also important to note that they are very conscious of not only organizational hierarchy, but age hierarchy as well. So when you have people who are of higher standing or position in an organization or are older than you, be sure to give them extra respect and pay extra attention to them. And also, their culture stresses the need to be polite as well as accept personal responsibility, and they stress the interdependence of all things. So today I've talked to you about the cultural differences, specifically in business etiquette, the language and writing systems, and the values between American and Japanese society. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our next presenter, who's going to talk to you about the Japanese economy.
Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Kayleen, and I am the head economic consultant of this team. I also recently graduated Stanford with a PhD in economics. and I am going to give you a brief overview of the Japanese economy by focusing on three central things, and that is the size of the economy as shown through GDP, the historic economic fluctuations in the growth cycle, and the value of the yen at present day. To start off with, we have the GDP. Japan has the third largest GDP in the world, that's behind the United States and China. However, if you look at developed economies, it's the second largest in the world behind the United States. It's also, I think, relevant to point out that Tokyo has the largest metropolitan economy in the world. What this means for people looking into business in Japan is that there's going to be a lot of competition. It's a well-developed economy. It's been there for a while. There is a large private and public consumer section, so it's going to require a lot of capital to put in the beginning of the investment. However, once broken into the economy, there is a lot of disposable income available, and there's large profit potential. Historically, Japan has had a very steady economy since World War II, and it rose all the way up through the 90s, and it wasn't until the late 90s that it began to falter in the period called the lost decade, and that has a lot to do with their problems with the yen, which I'm going to speak about in a moment. And currently, Japan had a brief recession in 2008. It got out of it in 2010, and it's continuing to be healthy with minor problems that have been dealt with and that continue to be dealt with. One of these major problems is the yen. The yen has historically been artificially deflated to protect against imports, and in the global economy that's developing and with Japan's desire to expand, this is becoming less, they can't do this anymore. They're going to have to start raising the yen to make it more competitive. And this is actually, once they start raising the yen, a good chance to get into business, because especially if your business is deciding to use exports and penetrate the Japanese market through exports, they'll be able to compete with Japanese-made products a lot easier. The Japanese central bank used to have a 0% interest rate. It's not currently 0% anymore. It is still the lowest interest rate in the world. So this provides good opportunities if you are looking to invest in capital in Japan and build infrastructure there. There's a lot. You can get loans at very cheap interest rates. And the yen recently reached a 15-year high with the US dollar, even though it's still a very uneven trade-off. And deflation becomes a persistent problem in Japan because of the value of the yen and because of their low interest rates. So that is something to keep in mind if you are looking to expand economically. Another important thing to keep in mind is the infrastructure of Japan, and that's what we're going to talk about next.
So as Gabe said, my name is Allison. I've worked with this firm for a few years, and I've also traveled all over the world with my show on the Travel Channel. I frequently visit Japan, and so today I will be talking to you about the location and the resources that it provides, as well as the many cities within Japan that make transportation very easy, and the recent major natural disaster that has affected them. So, as I'm sure y'all are all aware, Japan is an island chain off of Eastern Asia between the North Pacific and the Sea of Japan. According to CIA.gov, it is the largest importer of coal and liquefied natural gas, as well as the largest importer, or the second largest importer of oil. It also has a very high technology field. Nippon Telephone and Telegraph controls 95% of the fixed lines, giving it excellent international and domestic service. There are 357 internet providers, but internet use is very low there. There is also an extensive road network, which is currently a project about $32 billion to create this Tomai Maishin Expressway. So that being said, there are many cities within that create other road networks that make it very easy to travel within the country and to the country. There are many seaports, including Chiba and Yokohama, as well as 176 airports with terminals in cities such as Tokyo, and again, Chiba, Yokohama, as well as you can see, many more. There is a merchant marine fleet, which makes trade very easy between countries. And while it is easy to travel there, and while it is a very strong country, as I'm sure you're all aware, it was recently affected by a great natural disaster. In March 11, 2011, the city of Sendai specifically was hit by a 9.0 earthquake that caused a huge tsunami. Luckily, the city of Sendai is fairly isolated from Tokyo, which is one of the major economic areas. So it was not as huge of an economic issue as if it had hit closer to the main cities. However, it was disastrous. There are nearly 1 million people in Sendai, and 20,000 were killed. Many houses were destroyed. And according to an article on NPR, about 7% of their generating capacity was lost right away, as well as many nuclear power stations being hit, unfortunately causing nuclear explosions and reactions and radiation to leak into the water around Tokyo and into the surrounding oceans. According to the New York Times, the disaster also caused a change in leadership from the Prime Minister, Naoto Kan, was forced to resign because he could not get Japan to jump into action after the disaster. And he was replaced by Yoshihiko Noda, who hopefully will be able to help bring back the country to its standard that it was before. There are many efforts to help Japan in rebuilding its country, rebuilding the houses that were affected, as well as controlling the radiation leaks and making sure that nothing gets into the water supply or the food supply. So I talked to you today about the location and the resources that it offers, as well as the many cities within Japan that help transportation, and again, the natural disaster that has affected the country. So with that, we are going to talk about the market differences. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned before, my name is Faye Cervantes, and I have been with this group for the past couple of years, as well as I have done extensive research on international market structure. So today I'm here to talk to you about the imports and exports of Japan, as well as their market differences, their main industries, and I'll conclude by giving an overview of the Japanese market. So let's begin with the imports and exports. First of all, market research is very important for any business company who wishes to have well-targeted products and to be profitable. So with this being said, Japan last year exported to China mainly. Their main export was motor vehicles, and it was about 13.6%. As you can see on this chart, North America was next, being the United States. The Japanese also imported many things, the highest being petroleum at 15.5%. According to the CIA, the places that Japan imported from was China. Now, Japan has many different industries, their main industries being motor vehicles, steel, and agriculture. Now, as you recently heard, that their disaster from last year has affected their agriculture, and so the income for most households is down, which makes motor vehicles, their industry is also decreasing because nobody can afford to buy cars. Agriculture was a main form of income for many families in Japan. And so this makes steel now the greatest industry in Japan. The two largest steel makers from Japan have decided to merge together to form the second largest steel firm in the world. Moving on to the Japanese market. The Japanese are very brand conscious, so high-end brands do well in the Japanese market, such as Dior, Louis Vuitton, and this is because the main target is women. Women like high-end stuff, and so the Japanese focus on targeting women. Also, their marketing works through advertising and word of mouth. Women are more likely to talk about experiences, products, services, and this is another reason why the main target is women. Now, the Japanese have supplier loyalty. They are first come, first served basis. So if you go to a supplier and you are very loyal to them, they will be loyal back to you and only do business with you. With that being said, I've talked about the imports and exports of Japan. I've also talked about the main industries and how they are suffering, and I've also talked about the Japanese market in general. And so with that being said, we're going to talk about the government aspects next.
Thank you. Hi everyone, as Gabe said, I'm Renee. I majored in Japanese law, and I have also been a consultant here with Methods Framework for the past 5 years. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the history of Japan's legal system, as well as the structure of Japan's government, and also some risks you might face with doing business in Japan. A brief history of Japan's legal system. In the mid-19th to early 20th century, which is the industrialization period, the majority of Japan's judicial system was based on the civil law of Europe, specifically Germany and France. For example, in 1896, the Japanese government established a civil code based on the German model, which with some modifications is still in place today. Also, after World War II, a lot of laws were amended and replaced on the basis of American law. The government of Japan is a parliamentary government with a constitutional monarchy. Similar to the Queen of England, Japan has an emperor who's mainly just the face of the country, and the emperor mainly is just the symbol of the state and the unity of the people. Although the emperor doesn't have any political function, in all his state functions, he has to get his decisions approved by the cabinet, which therefore means the cabinet is the ultimate decision maker. Most of the power is held by the Prime Minister of Japan. And just similar to the United States legislative process, Japan has a separation of 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judiciary. The legislative branch is mainly the Japanese parliament, which is made up of 480 members in the House of Representatives and 242 members in the House of Councilors. All of these members are elected by the Japanese people. Then the executive branch is mainly the cabinet, which is headed by the Prime Minister of Japan, and the other members include other ministers appointed by the Prime Minister of Japan. The last branch, the judiciary branch, holds the highest court, the Supreme Court, and all of the judges are appointed by the cabinet. Next, a couple of risks you might face while doing business in Japan is that legal protection for breach of contract and non-payment is low, which might make international trading risky. Also, as the global CEO Pulse survey reported, after the tsunami and earthquake last year and its continuing consequences, many business people in Japan believe that Japan's future competitiveness is declining, and about 39% of people without operations in Japan agree with this assumption. Also, the overregulation in Japan continues to restrain its economic growth and slow down its market entry and exit, and also raise the cost of doing business in Japan. I hope you all have a better understanding now of the Japan's legal system and government structure, as well as some risks you might face with doing business in Japan. I also hope you have, with our presentation, you have been able to make an informed decision about whether or not your business will expand into Japan. As you can see, Japan has a large economy, it has high rates of imports and exports, and has several key port cities. It also has a similar government structure to the United States. To recap what my fellow consultants have said today, Gabe went over the cultural differences of Japan compared to the United States. Kayleen talked about Japan's economy and its trends in size. Allison talked about Japan's infrastructure and its key cities, and also some of the effects of the tsunami and earthquake last year. And Faith mentioned compared the Japanese market to the American market, and I covered the Japanese legal system, legal structure, and also some risks you might face. Despite these risks, however, our team of consultants encourages you to expand your business into Japan and believe you can profit greatly from this opportunity. We hope that our presentation has given you the ability to navigate Japan's geographic, linguistic, and cultural diversities that is needed to know in order to be successful in your upcoming business ventures. Thank you for hiring Methods Framework to talk to you about this possible business opportunity, and please let us know if you have any questions at this time.